On 19th May 1915, before a single Italian soldier had fallen on the Isonzo, General Luigi Cadorna issued his first directive on discipline. The document demanded what he called indestructible firmness from his commanders. It authorized extreme measures of coercion and repression against any form of indiscipline. 4 months later, he codified his philosophy in Circular 3525. The language was unambiguous. Discipline is the spiritual flame of victory. The most disciplined troops, not the best trained, win. The commanding officer has the sacred duty to execute immediately the recalcitrant and the cowards. This was not rhetoric. This was operational doctrine. On 27 May 1916, after elements of the 141st Infantry Regiment failed to regroup during an Austrian counteroffensive in the Trentino, the regimental colonel assembled the survivors in a meadow still scarred by shell craters. He selected 12 men by lot. He had them shot for desertion before noon. Cadorna's high command publicly praised him for it, mentioning his name in the daily bulletin as a model of leadership. The following day, in another unit from the same action, 28 men faced charges of rebellion. 12 were chosen by random selection and executed on the spot. By June 1917, Cadorna was writing to Prime Minister Paolo Boselli that summary executions had been carried out on a vast scale without regard to legal niceties. If indiscipline continued, he warned, he would resort to full decimation of units infected by the contagion. 750 Italian soldiers would be shot by their own army during the war, the highest number of any belligerent nation. The enemy had not broken this army. Its commander had already done that himself. The men in the trenches lived with the consequences of Cadorna's terror every waking hour. On the Baincisa Plateau that autumn, rations had been reduced to 600 grams of bread and 250 grams of meat, often replaced by dried salt cod, delivering barely enough calories for men who spent their nights hauling ammunition and digging in the thin, rocky soil. Private Agostino Tambuccio, an artillery gunner, later recalled that his unit had to bargain directly with field kitchens because the full ration never reached them. Officers skimmed portions for themselves. One frontline infantryman wrote that his company was shattered with hunger and sleep. Tears fill our eyes, crying like babies. The trenches they occupied were shallow excavations scraped into karst. The rocky soil resisted proper digging. Shelters consisted of niches roofed with boards and corrugated iron rather than deep underground galleries. Communication trenches to the rear remained incomplete. The men knew their positions were vulnerable. They had no authority to improve them. Behind them stood the carabinieri, carbines leveled at their backs during attacks, ready to shoot anyone who retreated without orders. Veterans remembered them with a phrase that needed no translation. Ai carabinieri col moschetto puntato nella schiena. The carabinieri with the carbine pointed at our backs. The threat was not theoretical. After one failed assault, an officer assembled his company, drew lots among men he judged to have faltered, and had several shot immediately. Survivors recalled the condemned men trembling, reciting the Ave Maria, the volley sounding like a door slamming shut on a stone corridor. And ahead of them, across the wire, something was gathering. From early September, soldiers whispered about German troops unloading at Tolmino Station. Different helmets glimpsed through binoculars. Sharper artillery fire, more accurate than the Austrians had managed in 2 years. One NCO wrote in October, "We hear it said that for days they have been unloading German troops at Tolmino Station. Someone says he has seen different, shinier helmets, but no one tells us anything definite." No one told them anything at all. At 2 o'clock in the morning of 24th October 1917, the German 35th Pioneer Battalion fired 894 gas projector tubes from positions near Plezzo. 818 bombs found their targets. Within seconds, 6.5 tons of phosgene hurtled into a narrow ravine behind the Italian front line. The high stone walls trapped the gas. The confined space concentrated it. Men died before they understood what was happening. Phosgene is nearly odorless compared to the battlefield stench of cordite and decomposition. The sentries straining to see through the thick morning fog were slow to recognize the danger. Those who managed to pull on their masks found them useless. Italian filters were designed for chlorine, not for this mixture of diphosgene and diphenyl chloroarsine that simply bypassed the cloth and charcoal. When German pioneers entered the ravine after dawn, they found between 600 and 800 Italians dead at their posts. Many were still in their bedrolls. Some had managed half-fitted masks. Others lay in attitudes indicating sudden death, arms reaching for equipment, faces turned toward exits they never reached. Only isolated survivors remained, so badly injured from exposure they could not speak. Private Enzo Moretti of the 46th Division was sleeping in a cave 50 meters behind the front line when the projector bombs arrived. He woke to a strange metallic taste at the back of his throat, like sucking on a copper coin while breathing through wet gauze. His lungs began to burn before he understood what was happening. The darkness was absolute. Someone was screaming deeper in the cave, a high animal sound that echoed off the limestone walls and seemed to come from everywhere at once. Moretti groped for his gas mask. His fingers felt thick and clumsy, the straps tangled. By the time he pulled it over his face, his chest was already tightening, each breath producing less air than it consumed. He crawled toward what he thought was the entrance, but the darkness offered no reference points. The stone floor was slick with something his hands did not want to identify. Bodies lay in his path, warm bodies, still bodies. When he finally emerged into the gray dawn, he could not stand. He lay on his side in the mud, breathing in shallow sips, watching the fog drift through the abandoned positions like something alive and hunting. By 9 o'clock, the Italian defensive system had ceased to exist. German stormtroopers moved through the fog in small groups, bypassing bunkers entirely, heading straight for gun positions and command posts. Telephone lines had been severed by the bombardment. Runners sent back through the gas-filled valleys did not return. The Italian Second Army's forward units went the entire first day without orders. Cadorna's headquarters did not issue directives until somewhere between 6 in the morning and 11 at night, an 18-hour window during which the front ceased to exist as a continuous line. By dawn on 25 October, the collapse had acquired its own momentum. Units that had never seen a German soldier abandoned their trenches because the formations beside them had vanished in the night. The breakthrough between 4th and 27th Corps opened a wound through which German stormtroopers poured unopposed, advancing 25 kilometers on the first day along the excellent valley road toward the Venetian plain. But the penetration itself was not the catastrophe. The catastrophe was how each withdrawal forced the next. As units fell back, they exposed the flanks of formations still holding their ground. The enormous river of people that formed, soldiers, civilians, wagons, guns, had no destination because no one knew where a defensive line still existed. Headquarters staff loaded documents onto lorries and retreated west, often moving faster than the combat units they were supposed to command. Private Giacomo Rossi of the Sassari Brigade found himself on the valley road west of Cividale on the night of 27 October. He had been walking for 19 hours. His boots had split at the seams, and each step drove mud and gravel into the raw flesh of his feet. The road was a river of humanity. Artillery pieces dragged by exhausted horses whose ribs showed through their coats. Ambulances carrying wounded who groaned with every jolt. And between all of this, the civilians, women carrying infants, old men pushing handcarts, children who had stopped crying from pure exhaustion, and simply stumbled forward. The rain had not stopped in 2 days. It fell in sheets that soaked through every layer of clothing. No one spoke. The only sounds were the squelch of boots in mud and the crash of artillery from behind them, closer than it had been an hour ago. Near a destroyed bridge, Rossi passed an artillery battery abandoned in perfect order. The guns still pointed east. Ammunition was stacked neatly beside each piece. The crews had simply walked away. What remained behind told a story of industrial devastation. The final tally reached 3,150 artillery pieces captured, more guns than most nations possessed in their entire arsenals. Italy lost roughly 3,000 machine guns and 2,000 mortars. In some sectors, supply dumps sat untouched, quartermasters having fled so quickly they had not attempted demolition. Italy's artillery park had been cut in half in a single week. On 28 October 1917, Cadorna issued his official bulletin. The words were precise and devastating. They retired in a cowardly way without fighting or ignominiously surrendered to the enemy. The Italian government tried to block publication. They failed. Soldiers who had survived 11 Isonzo offensives, who had climbed wire under machine gun fire for 2 years, learned that their commander-in-chief had branded them cowards. Cadorna appointed General Andrea Graziani to restore discipline. Carabinieri screened the roads, pulling stragglers from the muddy tracks. On 16 November, 19 men were shot in the back for sundry offenses. Another died for saluting without removing his pipe. 2 more were executed for hiding flour in their haversacks. Private Alessandro Ferrara of the 142nd Infantry Regiment stood in a line of 53 men in a farmyard near Pordenone on the morning of 17th November. An officer stood on a wooden crate reading from a document. The selection method was explained without emotion. Every 5th man would step forward. Ferrara counted. He was 21st. The world continued to exist after that realization, but at a great distance. He was marched with 9 other men to the stone wall. He stood with his back to the wet stones and looked at the firing squad. 12 men with rifles raised, and wondered if they had been his comrades before the front collapsed. The sound of the volley was like a door slamming shut. By the time the remnants reached the Piave on 4th of November, the scale was undeniable. Approximately 305,000 Italian casualties, including 265,000 prisoners. More than half the army's effective strength had ceased to exist. At Rapallo, Allied leaders confronted the reality. British and French divisions would have to be rushed to Italy immediately. The nation that had entered the war to seize territory had become a dependent, its army rebuilt with foreign weapons. When Mussolini consolidated power, silence became policy. The press law of 1925 empowered authorities to suppress publications deemed to attack the prestige of the state. Veterans who survived the gas attacks and the 80-mile retreat found their stories unwelcome. Emilio Lussu's memoir of command and competence could not be published in Italy. It appeared in Paris in 1938. By the early 1930s, fascist textbooks reduced Caporetto to a few lines stressing moral disintegration and socialist betrayal, while entire chapters glorified Vittorio Veneto. Mussolini made the mechanism explicit. We have created our myth. The myth is a faith, a passion. It is not necessary for it to be a reality. Our myth is the nation. Our myth is the greatness of the nation. And to this myth, we subordinate everything. What could not be mythologized was subordinated into silence. Veterans learned the pattern: public silence, private memory. Notebooks stayed in drawers. Many survivors avoided speaking of La Rota, the route, because it called into question their identity in a culture that demanded only heroes. Corporal Marco Ferrante of the Friuli Brigade survived the gas attack of 24th October. He survived the retreat. He survived the firing squads. He did not survive the silence. In 1923, Ferrante returned to the village above Bovex where his position had been. He found the entrance to the cave where his company had sheltered. The bodies had been removed, the walls had been scrubbed, but the stone floor still showed dark stains that no amount of water could lift. He had never told anyone what happened in that cave. The words for it did not exist in the language of victory that the nation now demanded. Ferrante died in 1954 of pulmonary fibrosis, a condition the doctors attributed to chemical exposure during the war. His lungs had been scarring for 37 years. The death certificate listed his cause of death as natural. His notebooks were found in a trunk in his attic, still wrapped in oilcloth. His daughter burned them without reading them. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more World War historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.